about...
Do I believe Starmer? No.
I was seeing you talking about it. He's gone quite far, though.
In what sense?
Well, I do wonder. I've got some sympathy for him here because he's found that reform got lots of the vote. And now he's going, okay, I obviously need to, people don't want immigration, I think. I've got to come down. And he sort of come out sounding a bit like a robot and almost too far, wasn't it? Do you think?
Too far?
Well, it was like, we're coming for you. We're going to get you.
I didn't hear that. I listened to a speech. It sounded like someone saying quite sensible things, but not really believing them at all. Like when I think of Keir Starmer, he always looks like he's like one of those men on a poster doing like a missing cat appeal. That's what he looks like. But it's so incredibly inauthentic that I actually think it's not going to work because I wrote a Substack about this and I did a video about this. My sense is he's attempting to like shoot the reform fox, so to speak. But we all know he's not being authentic. There's no one who cares about that issue, who cares about illegal immigration or mass immigration from low-skill, low-wage countries, let's say, who's going to look at Keir Starmer, listen to that speech that he did, and go, oh, that's Keir Starmer, he's really changed his mind about that, right? And also, and partly because of that, I don't think he's actually going to do the things that he wants to pretend he's going to do. And I certainly don't think he's going to get the results that he needs to actually convince people, not least because I think in order to solve that problem, you actually are going to have to do some pretty difficult things. I mean, if you look at it objectively, every single person in the Conservative Party who at the time they were in office or in government said, oh, we can't leave the ECHR, we've got to do Rwanda, or we got to do this, or we got to do that. They've all since come out, since they are no longer in power, and said, oh yeah, we need to leave the ECHR. Rishi Sunak's a good example of this. He forced out Suella Braverman for talking about needing to leave the ECHR, among other things. And then after he's left office, he's the one saying that's what has to happen. And so is Starmer going to do that? No, he's not going to do that. And what that means is he will not deal with what I think is actually the main issue in this conversation, which is illegal immigration. That's, I think, the thing that gets everyone annoyed. And I include a lot of people who are not traditionally concerned about that issue. But I just think, first and foremost, it's like common sense. Why would you want to have boatloads of illegal immigrants coming to your country? And number two, it costs... the figures change all the time, but it's like £10 million a day for hotels at one point. It might be less now because they've just let them out or whatever, but that was the cost at one point. And third, I think it's a very British thing. It's like, it's really unfair. And these people are jumping the queue, right? So it like offends us culturally as well, I think. At a cultural level, somebody circumventing the rules in order to jump ahead in the queue is just totally unacceptable. So that's the issue that I think if you were really serious about looking credible in immigration, that's what I think you'd tackle. I don't think he's going to do that.
Why is nobody doing this? Why are people only saying when they're out of government saying that they should do it?
I do you know what? I wish I had an answer. We've grilled people in Triggernometry. Like I remember, like the closest we came to getting an answer was two conversations. One with Rory Stewart and one with Suella Braverman. And Suella's answer was basically, well, the cabinet won't let me because we know that we have to leave the ECHR. But if we do, I think her words were something like, well, their argument would be we end up on the same list as like Belarus and, whatever. Whereas Rory's argument was like, well, you don't know what happens when you leave the ECHR and it might be really bad or something like that, right? There wasn't much of an argument there. Look, I think... it's quite understandable because Britain was heavily involved in the ECHR in creating that mechanism for protecting people who were genuinely fleeing war and conflict and so on. But I also think, the important thing in any situation is to adapt to the realities on the ground. And the reality on the ground or in the channel, so to speak, is that lots and lots of people are coming who are not refugees. They're just not. They're economic migrants. And I don't know if I'm an economic migrant exactly, but I came to this country for a better life, basically. I came here for schooling, the university, and then I stayed, and etc. So I understand that, but I followed the rules. And millions of other people have followed the rules. And I think it's inevitable that anyone who's concerned about fairness, including lots of immigrants like me, don't want illegal immigration to be happening. So why is it happening? Well, I think fundamentally it's quite a difficult thing to do politically, because you'd probably have to, I think you'd have to do a lot of things that are popular with the public, but are very unpopular with the chattering classes.
Right.
With sections of the media, with the BBC, with others. And you saw, Starmer, I didn't think he'd gone too far at all. I thought he made a pretty moderate speech. My issue with it, as I said, was that it was inauthentic. But you saw people like comparing him to Enoch Powell.
Yeah. Well, it might be because it chimes with people. It doesn't chime. It's a bit odd for Keir to be saying those things.
Well, but that doesn't make it like Enoch Powell.
No.
It's not a rivers of blood speech at all. And I just think it's this very one-dimensional, stupid thing where it's like someone says anything about immigration, therefore they're a bad person. That's kind of the place we've got to, which I never understood. I always thought, like, all policies, all government policy is really like a slider. You go, a bit more of this, a bit less of that, right? That's all that it is. Why would there are times in the history of this country when you wanted more immigration, after the war, for example, and you push that slider into the more pro-immigration position, and you have lots of people come, rebuild the country, blah, blah, blah. There are times when you've had, under the Labour government, we had more people come to this country in 13 years than you had since the Battle of Hastings in 1066 and 1950. And then you have 14 years of a sequence of conservative governments that then do even worse than that. At that point, to suggest that maybe it's time to slow down doesn't seem to me like some kind of bigoted position. It just seems like a sensible position. It's like you can be like I always give this example, you can be incredibly pro ice cream without thinking that you need to have ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if you refuse, you're a bad person. Like everything there's a right quantity of certain things.
Sure. So I've thought this before as well. You're not either pro or anti-immigration.
No, it's a stupid position.
Everybody in the country is probably pro at least one person entering through immigration, and everybody is probably against the idea of 50 million people coming. And there's probably somewhere in the middle where we have to meet.
Right. It seems uncomplicated to me, but there are people who like to moralize about these things because they don't have an actual explanation. They don't have a rational argument for why we need 1 million people coming to this country net every year. And by the way, one thing people always forget, Andrew, and I think it's really important that we talk about it, is the net figures are not reflective of reality. The reality is that you have more than that, obviously, coming in, and you have lots of people leaving. And some of those people leaving are immigrants who are going back to their country. But some of those people are actually the best and the brightest of Britain, who are leaving because taxes are so high, because business is so difficult to run, etc. So it's not like the number that you get is the actual reality. The reality is you're getting more immigration than that while losing a lot of your own people who are going to be the backbone of this country for years to come. That's kind of a problem.